Yes.
shift you into new directions.
That's right.
And did you become interested in ritual at that point? With the tombs, I suppose.
Yes, I was interested in ritual. I mean, that was partly Edmund's influence.
You'd already read political systems and so on.
Oh, political systems, yeah, doesn't get much of interest but he had written other things which were interesting on ritual.
Was any of Levi-Strauss beginning to have any influence by that time, or not?
Yes, I mean, I could see the significance of the overall scheme. I like the overall scheme of the elementary structures. I liked, I'd been interested in linguistics, and that became much more important later. And therefore the link between linguistics and structuralism and social structuralism of Levi-Strauss meant a lot to me in a way that I think it didn't to most British anthropologists at the time, partly because they had no understanding of linguistics and what were morphemes and structural linguistics and things like that. Well, I did.
Which you had taught yourself by going to lectures at...
No, I did a sort of subsidiary degree in linguistics.
Did you? When? At the LSE?
At the LSE there was a subsidiary degree, you could do that. I've been taught very badly, but I was very, very interested in linguistics, so a lot of it was taught by myself.
You're bilingual to start with, or
yes.
do you speak any other languages, European languages? Or?
I can get on. I mean, I did German, so I can speak German. No, not very well. I have now almost completely forgotten. I can understand Italian and get on with it when I'm there for a while. Same with Spanish.
When you came back, you wrote it up, the thesis up with Tamby. Was Edmund your internal examiner?
No. My internal examiner was a rather great figure.
Grey or great?
Grey, called G.I. Jones.
I was going to ask you whether it was G.I. I've interviewed G.I.
He was a rather nice man, actually.
He was very sweet. His widow is still alive.
Is he still alive?
Ursula is still alive, yes. His widow.
I know, I didn't know him at all. And I had Adrian Mayer as an external examiner, because I think they asked me, who would you like as an external examiner? So I said Adrian Mayer.
And they liked the thesis.
He liked the thesis, he passed it. It was a time when large numbers of theses, you probably, I don't know if you were around at that time, were being referred, so it was a great relief.
No, I didn't know that. They are a game, but and then it was published.
Well, for a while, yeah, fairly quickly. It was published, more or less. I mean, I rewrote it to a certain extent, not much. It was published. And it was fairly well received, actually. I mean, most people began to read it. I think it was different. It was very different.
Was it CUP who published it?
No. You see, and that was it was a. See, I think I was saying to you, both Marilyn and I were just out. You know, I mean, nobody had anything against us, but they didn't really.
No way to place you.
We didn't belong to anybody. And people who belonged to people were put in the Cambridge series, and the people who weren't, like Marilyn and me, were put in this series done by Seminar Press, I think it's called, which is a branch of academic press. So both Marilyn's first book and mine were published there.
But it was well received. I mean.
Well, yeah, it was well received, and I got sort of very good reviews. You know, it was sort of really good reviews from people who didn't know much about Madagascar. Seemed to have been very interested in John Middleton, Gulliver. Don't know why they asked them to review it, but they did. And then also I began to write other things. Jack had been doing that seminar on literacy, and he asked me to write, to do something, to take part in it. And that was fun. I mean, Audrey Richards asked me to take part in the thing on councils.
Oh yes, which was again a Cambridge Papers, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
they were Cambridge Papers, and so I published both those things, and that was nice. You know, there were sort of things which both those articles were very, very different from what I was writing in my thesis. And I think, you know, through them, Audrey got to know my work. Obviously, Jack got to know my work. Didn't really know it. Yeah.
And did you get a job straight away? Those were the...
I did. I got a job in Swansea for 1 year.
For 1 year, it was a temporary lectureship.
No, it wasn't a temporary lectureship, but my wife, I was married by then, and so my wife had a job in London, and so as soon as there was a job available in London, I applied and got one in LSE.
What was Swansea like for that year? Did you enjoy it?
I loved Swansea. It was partly because I made good friends, and then, you know, then I was. I spent a lot of time swimming, spending large numbers of evenings cooking on the beach, and I made friends with some psychologists. So I very much enjoyed it. It was a bit of a, the department was sort of not all that brilliant, but I enjoyed it. I liked it very much.
But London called, so you came. We went back to the LSE.
Yes.
What year was that? About 68.
68. Yeah, 69 actually.
Just after I left, I was there for 2 years. And by that time, Friedman was just leaving for Oxford, I suppose.
He was still there.
Raymond had retired.
Raymond, it was a rather poor period in the LSE. I mean, you know, the LSE had I think after Raymond.
Lucy had gone.
She was still around.
And Robin Fox was just leaving.
He'd gone.
Yeah. So Jean was there?
Jean came at the same time as me. And I got on quite well with Jean at first. I lost a bit of touch with her. Oh yeah, it was very close personally, but not so much intellectually.
Ian was there?
Who?
Ian Lewis?
He hadn't come.
He hadn't come.
He came that year.
And Peter Loizos came a bit later.
Yeah. No, he came at the same time.
Alfred Yale?
No, he wasn't there. He was an undergraduate student. So that, yes, I think I was not very impressed by the staff at LSE at that time, but I was by some of the graduate students, of whom Alfred, who I knew from Cambridge before, and I was quite close to him and a few other graduate students. Olivia Harris.
Did you? I mean,
you know, I was the same age as them. You know, so I spent more time with them, and intellectually I had far more. You know, LSE was very. I mean, it was very. I think it sort of took a while to pick up again for about sort of. There was nobody really of great interest there, in my view, until Johnny came. Really.
When did he come?
He came about 6 or 7 years afterwards.
And Chris Fuller came back later?
Afterwards, that was quite a while afterwards. But Alfred had come, Alfred, Johnny, then, you know, things were beginning to pick up again.
What do you think of Alfred's work?
I think I've always thought that Alfred's work is brilliant. I've always thought he's extraordinarily interesting. I think a lot of it is wrong. That's because he actually says various things. Sometimes it's terribly muddled, but some of it is absolutely...
What is the best, is it?
The best is his book on art.
Art and
the book on time, I think, is not very good, in my view. It's muddled, it's interesting, but it's muddled. His... I think a lot of his essays are brilliant. Absolutely extraordinarily brilliant. I mean, he really is a very, very brilliant person. You know, somebody like Mary Douglas for me. You know, he's sort of among the stars. and Johnny in a different way.
In what way?
I think Johnny is, I mean, I trust what Johnny writes much more than I trust what Alfred writes. First of all, I think he is within a kind of the traditional British sociological tradition, about the best thing that's ever come out of it. It was very good sort of doing books together, because I was never really in that, I don't think. But, you know, the push and pull of the two different approaches was extremely useful. He's also a brilliant reader, which I think is something I greatly admire in people as well, as much as they're being a writer.
By reader, you mean reading
reading critically, evaluating, helping other people, and helping the understanding of people's work.
And seminar holder, I suppose.
Fantastic.
Raymond was quite good at seminars.
Yeah, I mean, Raymond was very, very good at seminar. Raymond is, I have incredible admiration for Raymond's work, but I don't think he's brilliant at all. No. I mean, Edmund had brilliant, you know, I mean, yes, because that's right.
Were you still in touch with Mary Douglas at this time, or had she gone to America?
Yes, I did on and off. I mean, you know, I hadn't been in touch with her. I mean, I just sort of admired her from afar. But then I did get in touch, and she also was very generous about my work. She got quite excited about it, and we. So yeah, so, I mean, all her life really, on and off, I sort of had contact with her. I was not close to her personally. I was close to Johnny personally.
This is the period when many people associate you with Marxism. I mean, Marxism.
Well, I was, yeah.
What is there anything?
Well, I mean, there are two elements. Well, one of the things that you've missed out.
No, we've got plenty of time.
All right. One of the things you've missed out is that the year after I came to LSE, I was invited to Berkeley.
Ah, I had missed that. Yeah.
And that is very, very important. Because in Berkeley, I again had a very good time and made very good friends there. But the people who influenced me were not anthropologists, but linguists, mainly linguists and philosophers. And I always had that linguistics interest, and began to be really very interested in what one would call cognitive science then. And people, so Searle, John Lakoff, I got to know these people quite well, and was particularly interested in their work. And Berlin Kay.
Oh yes.
I began to read quite a lot of developmental psychology, and also Chomsky. I mean, it wasn't there, but that's where I got to know Chomsky.
You got to know him personally? Or?
No, well, I mentioned it a bit, but no, I was good to know his work.
Were you tempted to stay in America?
No, I mean, I was offered actually a job. It was a bit difficult, partly because my wife wasn't offered one. But also...
You must have been offered jobs there several times, in fact. Later.
Yeah, but I'm talking about that time.
Yeah.
You know, they asked me to stay after that year. But no, I wanted to go... I was not very comfortable. I mean, I was sort of politically uncomfortable because, you know, it's still... I basically was very close to various Marxist but non-communist movements, mainly in France, not in Britain. And also, I was, I thought of it at one stage. I did consider it. I
you
love
America?
California. I
Mm.
loved California.
Mm.
I loved going swimming. In the sea. I made quite good friends. Again, as I said, basically not so much with the anthropologist, like Glenizer, who's an archaeologist,
Oh yes.
who I was very friendly with, an economist who I'm called Alain de Gendry, who I'm still quite close to.
Mm.
So I enjoyed those people. And
Did your wife go with you? Or
yes, she was. Yes.
And did you have children by
Yes.
then?
Yes.
Anyway, so you came back, and we got to the time when you wrote Marxism and Anthropology and other.
Yeah, I mean that was not really. I was interested in Marxist ideas that have been all along. I mean, ever since I was about 16, really. And the reason, and therefore I knew a lot about it. I mean, Marxism and Anthropology is a historical book. I mean, it's about the history of the relationship. I knew quite well the French Marxist anthropologists, and I was very impressed by them.
Maurice Bloch, Emmanuel Ferry.
Those two especially by Emmanuel Ferry. Slight doubts about ability, but that's another matter. And I knew a lot about Marxism, much more than my British contemporaries. And by then quite a bit more about structuralism. And of course, structuralism continued to interest me. I mean, in terms of the interest in linguistics and the developing interest in cognitive psychology, which for me were linked to the Marxism. There's a very close link for me in my thinking between a kind of naturalizing of social science in linguistics, psychology, especially cognitive psychology, and Marxism.
Did you take any formal training in cognitive psychology or psychology?
No.
I
just read and I got to know people. I got all these things were sort of just in the back boiler really all the time. So I got to know a few people working in cognitive psychology. And then I began to do work with Susan Carey in who's in Harvard now. She was at MIT at that time. And began to talk. I got to know Dan Sperber at that time, who I've been quite close to. It's very funny. I mean, we met in a very odd way.
How was that? If you want to tell us.
Yes, apparently. That I wrote an article which has been very often reprinted on ritual, which also contains a criticism of basically semiotics and the semiotic approach, which was beginning to influence a few British anthropologists also. It really is implicit criticism of structuralism, of sort of Straussian structuralism, called Symbol, Song and Dance, which took a long time in coming out. It was the same time as Dan Sperber was writing his book on symbolism. We didn't know of each other at all. And my article came out first. And Dan and a friend of his, a man called Smith, a Frenchman, Pierre Smith, had read my article and had sort of written something which was never published about it. Sort of 200-page reply to an article, which he gave me recently. And in a sense, we're very close. I mean, so what Sperber was saying in that book and what my article was saying was very close on many points, and they both discuss other things. And that irritated both of us. And so his response was this massive thing that he was going to publish. At that time, I was sent by the JRAI his book. We didn't know each other, which I criticised. And he felt he couldn't publish his article because it would have seemed a sort of tit-for-tat business. So we began to be very aware of each other, and then we met at the conference, and we knew exactly who we were, and we started to talk, and ever since. We've been fairly close, though different.
And you say
but we did have that same combination of interests, you see, of anthropology, linguistics, and cognitive science. And therefore, I think that is what influenced the similarity of our point of view.
I remember when I once met you, you were doing nearly all the PhD supervising at the LSE, or in anthropology, you seem to have a lot of PhD students.
Yes, I did have a lot. Yes, I loved doing that. Yeah, and with very different PhD types of students.
How many PhDs do you think you supervised? Any idea?
A hell of a lot.
You never counted, but...
No, I mean, I think it's something... I think it's something of the order of between 30 and 40, I should say.
You're not mainly in areas that you're interested in, though. I mean, you didn't supervise on, as it were, Japan, or...
Yes.
You later became interested in Japan.
I did. I was interested in Japan. But I supervised in all sorts of areas. I was very lucky with the graduate students who I had. Not entirely luck. I mean, to a certain extent, the ones who I thought were good, I sought out, and vice versa. I think, but very varied ones. And so I've had supervised people working in Japan, supervised people working in the Philippines. I've been always interested in Southeast Asia because of Madagascar. I mean, that's similar. Malaysia. Also, this is linked with the holes that there were at LSE, different kinds. South America and the Andes, which is an area I was also interested in. I don't know why. I mean, I am still very interested in it. Obviously, Madagascar, China.
You supervised on China.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of...
Later, LSE had Charles Stafford, and
well, I supervised him.
Did you?
Yes.
He was one of your students.
Yes. There are 4 of them who are one of my students in LSE.
Who are they?
There's Charles. There's Fenella
Canal.
Richa Stuti, and Catherine Allison.
Are there other students who you particularly admired or have gone on to do interesting?
Oh yes, a lot.
Thing?
I mean, David Lang is one of my first students, graduate students. Joel Kahn in America. I mean,
quite a few.
I had a lot to do with the supervision of Olivia Harris, even though I wasn't a supervisor for complicated reasons. I'm just trying to... I mean, if I sort of think around Michael Stewart.
He was one of your students.
Yes. Janet Carston, Sophie Day.
You left a large legacy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot in Britain and a lot abroad as well. Got lots of, so yeah.
You enjoyed
Ruby Watson
the PhD supervising. Did you do much undergraduate supervision teaching?
Yes.
Did you enjoy that as well?
I like lecturing very much, yes. Yes, I have more difficulty in the sort of, what would be called in Cambridge supervision with undergraduates. I don't with graduates, but I don't think they understand me very well. I get a bit bored.
But lecturing, do you lecture, well, we'll see tonight, but I mean, this is later on in your life, but do you lecture from detailed, or do you read out lectures, do you?
No, I don't. What I tend to do, I mean, that's not what I'll be doing tonight, because this is a student society, so I'll try to just be very general. But I like to sort of write a lot, and then just write notes from which I lecture, but I've written much more before. And I like lecturing on new things, on new topics, because I mean, lecturing is, like supervising graduate students, is one of the ways in which I sort of think forward and learn new things.
So quite a lot of the ideas in your lectures go into your other writings later on.
Yes, they're sort of places of trying to work things out, as well as the interaction with the graduate students. I mean, in the sense that I get things from them.
What about the other part of one's life as an academic, the administration?
I hate.
You hate?
I mean, I ran the department. I was quite pleased. I became convener of the department for quite a long period.
Did you?
Yeah, almost 9 years in fact. And I think I will put that, did a pretty good job in terms of that, in that I renewed the department very much, you know, I mean, with the help of other people. And that was very much, a lot of it was luck. You know, people going and the ability to bring in new, exciting people. You know, and I felt, you know, that there was a period when the LSE really picked up again, which was that period.
When were you convener? Between about 81 and
90 to, well, probably started in 19, towards the end of the 1980s. Well, I'm not quite sure exactly, but it was more or less from the end of the 1980s to the middle of the 1990s. And, you know, the department was exciting. I mean, it was a really exciting period, partly because there was Alfred there, there was Johnny, there was Chris. We had very, very good graduate students like Rita Astuti, like Fenella, like David Lang, like, I mean, I felt, you know, it was a real high point. And I felt that when I'd been in an undergraduate department that had just been very, very good, and then there was a sort of low point. Picked up again, I hope it carries on. I think it was still very good, you know, till recently. I mean, recently we don't know what the future is going to be, obviously.
Can I just ask you about, I mean, there's a whole assembly of your theories. There's the first field work, there's the Marxism, there's the work on language and oratory, there's work on violence, there's work on memory. If you had to sort of pick out one or two highlights from what you've achieved in your thinking, what would you pick out?
Well, in terms of the writing, I mean,
Yes,
I would sort of say just probably a series of articles, first of all, the past and the present, and then that article on symbol, song and dance. And then more recently, the work on memory, the work on the article on cognitive science and anthropology, which I did, and then the book. I think From Blessing to Violence is unusual and interesting book. Perhaps, you know, the latest article I've done, which is this thing on religion, and well, it's not really about religion. It's about it's kind of takes an evolutionary look at the nature of social organisation, which just come out in the Royal Society proceedings.
Yes, I read the New Scientist, I think.
Oh yeah, well, that's a bit unfortunate. I've had that, yeah, but I mean, you read the article, the actual article. This is rather different.
Because it made it rather oversimplified.
Yes.
What is the argument seemed to be, well, it's a bit better if you tell me what.
The argument is that most of the work on the evolution of the social seems to think of it as a sort of gradual continuation of complexification. But that is thinking of the social in much too straightforward a way, because the human social involves what one might call a level of imagination, which is that of roles, separate from individuals, groups which have an imaginary existence apart from any kind of empirical existence. And if one thinks of and that element is a new phenomenon which is not continuous with the social organisation of other primates. There's no trace of that among any other primates. It dissolves the religious, because the religion stops being a subject, since one realizes that an aspect of human social is just the same as the religious. So, you know, it's a mistake to try to look for explanations, evolutionary explanations of religion. One needs to look for evolutionary explanations of a much wider phenomena, which includes what we call religious, but that's not an analytically useful term. And that, to a certain extent, this probably should be explained partially in terms of a capacity to imagine possible worlds, and that our social involves the imagination of possible worlds, which are a kind of game on those which seem more intuitive, and that's not specific to religion. It's general to human society.
And it's something that children are particularly.
Yes, and that's what I'm talking about. I mean, I talk about it very loosely, but that children begin to do that very early. I think that's very key.
I mean, obviously in that moment when people start talking about imagined communities, one thinks of Benedict Anderson. Is there any overlap with?
Well, there's a bit of an overlap. I mean, you know, the point that that communities are imagined entities, I suppose, is fairly.
It's much older than Anderson.
It's much older than Benedict Anderson.
Actually, in Tocqueville, among others.
Yeah, I mean, it's and that it's linked, you know, that the specific mechanisms which Anderson says created it don't entirely convince me. I mean, sort of print thing and so on doesn't seem to be very necessary for this.
No, it must have existed before print, well before.
Well, that's the point, yes.
About 50,000 years ago,
yes.
As you point out. Your overlap between anthropology and cognitive science reminds me of someone who was here for 7 or 8 years, Pascal Boyer. Do you know?
I knew him very well. And we have a lot of overlap of views, but a lot of differences as well. I think, you know, the difference of, I mean, you know, we share a lot, but the big difference, if you like, is that Pascal, a bit like Dan Sperber, thinks of certain elements that one could discover in cultures as fixed because they have an innate basis. I'm quite convinced about the business about the innate basis, but anything that comes from an innate basis is inevitably churned up, transformed, through the historical and cultural process, and therefore looking for bits of pure, uncultural elements seems to me to be misguided. And that's the fundamental difference.
I suddenly realised when I was talking, of course, he wrote a book called The Invention of Religion or something.
Yes, he did, and I mean, to a certain extent, that article is basically a criticism, the one you were referring to as his work. In fact, I mean, his work is just an elaboration of ideas which Dan Sperber had set out earlier.
We've covered a tiny part of your life and work. Is there any other large area which I should have asked you about? Bookbinding?
Yes, I'm a bookbinder. Yes, I am a bookbinder. I am a qualified bookbinder.
Yes, I remember you talking to my wife Sarah about that. She still does a bit of binding.
I went through the courses in the College of Printing. I'm not doing very much now, but I did enjoy that very much. I'm sort of, I quite enjoy sort of crafts.
Craft activities.
Yes.
So there's nothing that you would like to put on record that I've...
Of great importance.
Time for families?
Yes,
children?
I have children.
What children do you have?
I have a son and a daughter. And grandchildren.
Has observing them been helpful in your...
Yes, I mean, I've been very interested in child development. One very important point, one thing that has been missed out, or I don't know if it has been missed out, is that I've benefited a lot from working with people like Susan Carey, who's a developmental psychologist and also, I think, a brilliant sort of thinker. I've benefited a hell of a lot from Dan Sperber. Paul Harris was another psychologist. These people I find much more exciting than many anthropologists in many ways, because I do think of anthropology as ultimately a sort of natural science, and therefore I am sort of more in contact with them in a sense, while I find a lot of other work in the social sciences now sort of involved with what I call sort of dissecting shadows.
Referring to the cultural turn and postmodernism and things like this, or
yes, and other yes.
such things.
Yes. I'm very much philosophically a naturalist, like Dan Sperber, and that sets us apart really. Very fundamentally, actually.
I think that's probably a very nice point to end. Thank you very much indeed, Maurice.